The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Meanwhile, it is one thing when an angry congressman says that the president is hiding something. But when a former vice president of the United States says it, game changer over. Did a former vice president just point his finger at this president? Because when Dan Quayle ticks off the scandals facing the White House and then stops at Benghazi to say something really doesn't add up with all the stories coming out of the White House, well, just listen. Ignorance will be his defense. And maybe government has gotten so unwieldy, Vice President, that's the way it is, and who can blame it, you know, for being out of the loop. But out of the loop on all of this, it raises an issue, does his very aloofness promote this sort of thing?
You're not out of the loop on Benghazi. An American ambassador and 3 other Americans were killed. You know what's going on, and you know what your spokespeople are going to say that weekend. So
you would not have gone to Las Vegas the next day?
No, but he knew what they were going to say. I'm very confident of that.
All right, the vice, not so nice to Adam and Liz and Ron on whether Dan is saying this prez might be aloof, but he ain't dumb. Liz.
You know, what the former vice president said was really, really interesting, because now we have the IRS commissioner, former IRS commissioner Doug Shulman, visiting the White House 157 times. Now, I'm not saying he did make all of those 157 visits, because that could be a standing list. His name was on the list. But the point being, it was right at the time when Obamacare was being hotly opposed by the Tea Party. The House was set to turn over to Republican leadership in 2010. Listen, if the president here is saying that I had nothing to do with the targeting of tax-exempt groups, then turn over the memos and the meeting notes. Just give them, release them with the meetings with the former IRS commissioner. And if he doesn't, then the House Committee on Investigations and the Senate Permanent Subcommittee should subpoena them.
You know, one of the things that was interesting in his comments, Adam, he said he still felt that Benghazi, of all the scandals we have, whether it's the justice going after reporters or the IRS going after conservatives, that's the scandal that has the most weight and concern to him. You know, and it would flip conventional wisdom, because to Lizzie's point, the IRS seems to have the most legs to me, and I understand the deaths involved in Benghazi and make no light of it. But that is something that catches up with you. Now, I would collectively then say, if all of these scandals bespeak of a president who's out to lunch, is that any better?
Well, I just think that if we really are,
first,
really
Adam,
to believe.
Adam first. Adam, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. You know, I don't think it's that. I think it's interesting also that he would key in on Benghazi, because I think that's the weakest case. You know, I think he's saying, yes, the president was aware of what his people were going to say, and I think that's probably not very generous to the president. I'm sure the president was aware of it, a conversation was going on, but to pick on the situation where a tragedy had happened and to say that the president wasn't exactly on top of the details, I think is a different subject from, you know, saying the situation with the IRS where somebody was doing something wrong. These are two very different situations. I'm the least concerned about the administration's response in this difficult, confusing, tragic situation in Benghazi, Neil.
All right. Well, I don't want to over-hyperventilate it, but I will say this. At the very least, an ambassador died the next day. You're off to a political event. That alone bespeaks of either cluelessness or indifference. But you're right. I will play all of these together here, and Ron, raise with you this issue that an administration whose really prime defense these days is didn't know, out of the loop. We deliberately kept him out of the loop. One crisis, maybe 2 crises, possibly 3, 4, 5 crises. Now you're smoking something.
Well, that's what it seems like. It seems like we're supposed to believe that President Obama's only briefings come when he reads the teleprompter, and I think that assumes that we, the American people, are pretty ignorant to believe that. I think that President Obama had to have known, definitely on Benghazi, he should have been more engaged. And if this is supposed to be the most transparent administration ever, why doesn't he show us where he was that night, what he was saying that night, what the communications were when Benghazi happened? And with the IRS, release the memos. Let us see what was going on, what was happening. this looks really suspect
Release
to
the
have all
meeting
these
notes,
things
too.
connect.
And it's not just
absolutely.
between,
You know, if
and
I
not
may-
just, sorry, it's not just between the president and the IRS commissioner. It's also Valerie Jarrett, who, interestingly, strikingly, is nowhere to be found in these in any of these controversies, since she's
Well,
such a
that we know
powerful
of.
advisor
That we know
of right now. So you know what? Listen, the president is not a king. He's not royalty. He answers to the American people. He is working for the American people. The entire administration works for the American people. I say release those meeting notes and then let the American people decide.
Adam?
So in that vein, I don't think it's funny or particularly generous to suggest that the president only knows what he's reading on a teleprompter. I mean, Neil, that's actually one of your best jokes, and it's funny when you say it because you're not just reading from a teleprompter
It's actually
either.
true, but that's neither here nor there. All right, go ahead.
But
Wait a minute, let the prompter
what
move
we
on.
have to
Continue, Adam.
what we're losing sight of, it's fine. I mean, we should criticize the president. We should criticize the administration. We do not, however, have a right to know, what the president had for lunch or at what time
Adam,
he
real
got
quickly,
up to go to
you
the
think this
bathroom.
gets much worse? Just yes or no. You think this gets much worse for him?
I don't. No, I don't.
Okay, Ron, what about you?
I think it gets much worse. If this was the Bush administration, I think Adam would be taking a very different tone.
No, and to be fair, he's very consistent. I will say he's always very consistent and very honorable. Now, Liz, what do you think?
I think it gets worse.
You do? Much worse?
I think there will be. I'm not sure of special prosecutor, but I do think it gets more intense.
All right, guys, I want to thank you all. In the meantime, prompter, move up. Have a happy weekend. And I will see you Monday. No, seriously. Have a good one.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.